welcome to join us.
Well, that's also good.
Yep.
One of my favorite places.
When is that going to school? It's a Saturday
Have you ever thought about
Yeah, 19.
if you were on death row and you had a last meal, what it would be? Have you ever thought about that? Given that any thought?
Maybe boy yes.
Oh, yes, would be right up there with it, I think. We're today going to present Wayne with his, we framed up those songs that were given to him at the big singing and a picture. And Carol and I are working on that. We had to carry that down to the stage and put it on an easel. And so we've been, did you see that, Robert? We got a picture, that picture we're going to present to Wayne.
Wayne's not here today.
Wayne's not here today?
No, I saw him at McDonald's.
I think you're right. I think he's gone to, yeah. Maybe we'll give it to him tonight. Maybe he'll be here tonight. I'm thinking.
I think he said he only was doing it this
Yeah.
morning.
Well, forget doing anything this morning with that. We'll leave it up there. And, well, we were just going to, while he was up there making the report, I was going to try to do that real quick. And, but anyhow, it looks very good. Y'all can take a look at it today if you'd like. And we need to, anybody remember in prayer the Markles, of course. Now, the last report I had was good. Is that still accurate?
Last thing I saw was where Zach, I was just trying to find something, where Zach posted yesterday that he was up walking with it, but he was in a lot of pain.
Yes, that's the last I saw.
Okay, I can't find it.
But to me, that would be good news.
Yeah,
Up. You would figure it. Yes. And the same thing with Larry Reagan, I think. Larry was up walking, and she just said there were some negatives there. He lost his taste and smell some and appetite, but that would be understandable.
Oh, this was posted an hour ago, I'm sorry. Update on Michael. Saturday was rough. He did get a few naps, which were needed. At 2 a.m. he wanted up in the reclining chair. He's now been there for 6 hours. Took a short walk. He is now back in the chair napping and waiting on his liquid breakfast. He has finally been upgraded to enjoy. We were looking forward to watching the church online. So that was an hour ago. So he's doing.
Well, I hope he gets to watch this, maybe. They found a mass on his pancreas. They were doing a gallbladder examination, I think, and so they flew him to Jackson, I guess.
Oh, okay. I thought they flew him to Vanderbilt.
Well, let's say Vanderbilt. And they did the surgery and removed the mass and think they got all of it there. And also found that he did have like gallstones. I think they took those out too.
I know they did a couple of procedures, but I didn't see what they were.
And the other thing she told me that was a positive, right now he's receiving insulin because he's type 2 diabetic, but the doctors think that he's been on Ozempic, and that the Ozempic, they think, is what perhaps caused the mass to grow, even though, I mean, you'd have to have a mass for it to grow. I'm not trying to say Ozempic causes that, but it did, they think, possibly caused it to increase or grow, and that they're going to take him off that, put him on a different type of diabetic medication, but maybe that the mass is what caused the diabetes diagnosis, and there's some possibility, she said, that he might not have to take diabetic medicine anymore, and that his blood sugar will be better regulated by his pancreas. So I said, well, other than going through all of this, there are some positives in that. They found out that he had gallstones and took care of that pain, and that was accurate, but then they found the other, which could be life-saving. So kind of amazing things.
Your old school, your law school buddy, Dennis Plunk from Savannah.
Yeah.
And our friend from 50 years from UT He's having pretty serious surgery Tuesday.
Okay,
He's been struggling for about a year with a lot of pain, diminished mobility, and everything. They finally determined it was a fistula, which is an abnormal joining of an artery in the vein. And it's near his spine, and so he's having that.
okay,
They hope if it's successful surgery, they hope it's a good chance that he can recover some of his mobility function.
Wonderful.
But that's Tuesday in Beckerville.
okay. Others, anybody else that we?
Had a friend of mine pass away, Greg Resbeck.
Yeah, I saw that on Facebook.
Those of you that remember Ernie Resbeck from UTM
Yes.
days, that's his oldest son,
Mhm.
passed away suddenly yesterday.
Was he your age?
He was 2 years older than me, so he was 66. Good guy.
What did he do?
He worked in Memphis for a company that made these buildings. I can't remember the name of it, but that's what he did. Was sell those buildings.
Like sheds or something like that?
Yeah, like
Outbuildings?
the Soders. Do you remember the Soder family from years ago? They were in that sort of business, and the son really took off with it. Tim, and he's in Memphis too. And I think Greg was working with him on that.
Well, a friend of mine, J.R. Ross, that was the head of the West Tennessee Healthcare, had a heart attack and died this a couple of days ago. He was on the board at Union University when I was, and just a wonderful person, African-American man that rose from being a registered nurse to the head of the West Tennessee Healthcare, which is amazing. He went through the ranks, and there was in one of the first graduating classes of the RN program at Union. So anyhow, that's a major loss of a great leader there in our area. Well, that just I think tells us that our life is will end, and we don't know when. And so I also had a friend of mine that from South Fulton, Paul Phelps, the same age as me, that died. He played football at South Fulton and at UT Martin, and just a great guy. He was a farmer, had Parkinson's for many years, and I think he probably had a heart attack, but had suffered from Parkinson's. Found him on his tractor, and on the kind of the backside of his farm. And I told his wife, we were down in Memphis Saturdays a week ago at a soccer game with Mary Ann, and it was John Hatler's mother. I don't know if I'd never met her, I don't think, before, but she had grown up in South Fulton. I asked her what year she graduated and that kind of thing. I said, I've got a real good friend, Paul Phelps, is a couple of years behind you there. She said, he died last week. I said, not Paul Phelps. And she said, Paul Phelps died last week, she said. And so I had to go to Nashville Monday, and so on the way I called his wife and talked to her. Yes. Yeah. But I just thought a lot of him, and just a good guy. I remember at First Baptist South Fulton, I think. And I don't think it was Fulton. I think it was South Fulton.
Robert, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thank God there's been no side effects, and hopefully something happens enough to get it for 6 more weeks. No more poking or doctor's visits for like 6 weeks.
I thought you said it was a whole year. I thought you thought.
Oh, he does it for a year, every 6 weeks.
Oh, every 6 weeks. I thought that was.
Like 9
Yeah.
things like that.
So he's had his first treatment. Robert's had his first treatment. And so no side effects is what you're saying.
That's it. So we're ready. Thank you.
Robert informed us Wednesday night, and we need to pray about him for this. Apparently he only eats 1 meal a day, and I didn't know.
I eat twice on Sunday.
I didn't know he was mentally ill as well. but I suspected it, but that's proof.
By choice now, I try to feed him, but.
I get it. We're not blaming you, you know. Anyhow, for some reason, he eats one meal a day, and the doctors have told him he needed to do better on that.
If you eat all three of them at one time,
Well, that's kind of what he does.
Yeah, I get my
He
calories.
gets his calories, yeah.
I get them in. Sometimes I have to add things, but I don't think I made it, so it's last week.
I do that too. I
whether
don't
you
think
eat or
I
not.
ate enough. Well, let's look at living a life of purpose. And at least in this third session, we're in a situation where it seems to be more positive. These other two lessons we're learning from the negatives. Questioning purpose, abandoning purpose. Now we're living a life with purpose restored, or the opportunity of restoration. The point, through Jesus, we can be forgiven and restored to the purpose for which he created us. The writer of the introduction here talked about painting and how that you have to, repaint a house if you've painted it, the outside for sure, more often than probably the inside, but he had been part of that in his own life, he said, but that doesn't take much. We can, on our world changers sometimes, one year we were in Dallas, Texas, and they said I was going to be a crew chief. And I said, I think you have got me confused with somebody else. That's the person who knows what they're doing that then instructs the others, And so I said, I think you have the wrong person here. They said, we're going to scrape a house and repaint it. So I said, okay, I can do that. If you send somebody by every day or so to check, make sure we've done what we're supposed to. That was the year that Scott Hewitt was one of the chaperones that went, and he was a block over from me on another house project, and one of his projects was to tear down a shed. I remember that. And so he was in charge of all these young people, which he should have been able to do that. He was a teacher, coach. And so he said, let's attack this shed first, he said. He said, if y'all will take those windows out, take that door off. And he said, undo this, and undo this. He said, if y'all just back out of the way, I'll knock that thing down myself. And he went and basically tackled the shed, and it knocked it into just pieces. And they came over to our house to see what we were doing, because that was a 2-day job, that one, tearing down the shed. And Scott knocked it down with his own physical body. And they came over, and all those young people's eyes were like about that big. I said, what are y'all amazed at? He just knocked down a building by himself. And then we built with these kids. On the very first day we were there to make sure they could work together as a team. We took 2x4s and then cut the 2x4s into pieces about this big. And each one of them was to nail that onto 2 other pieces to make a ladder. And each one of them wrote things on their own, part of the ladder there, And at the end of the week, at the closing ceremonies, you're supposed to knock that piece out, and give that to the young person, And again, Scott, who is kind of interesting, but I made sure I said, somebody bring a hammer, to the closing ceremonies where we can knock those pieces out. And Scott forgot to tell his crew to do that. And they said, you want us to go back and get a hammer? He says, no. And with his fist, he knocked all those out for them and handed them to him. Bam, bam. Took them. There's yours. And again, they were, as I watched it. Anyhow, back to restoring a house by repainting it. But then he says, of course, there is the restoration of a painting. Restoration of a house, a day or two project, and it looks about as good even if an amateur does it. He used the term DIY, that's do-it-yourself, I think, in lingo. That's a do-it-yourself project, perhaps, painting a house. And but restoring a painting requires sometimes many years. They said restoring the Last Supper of Da Vinci, one of the 9 restorations of it, took 20 years, and painstakingly they tried to make sure they had the correct color. One of the great books I ever read was the biography of Da Vinci and by Walter Isaacson. And Isaacson had a chapter or 2 about the Last Supper painting, which I didn't know why it was so important. It's one of the the 2 greatest paintings he claimed ever painted, the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper are the 2 greatest. And it's painted on a wall at a monastery, and the Last Supper. And he fixed it so that any door you came in, if you look at it, it looks like you're looking at it head on, is one thing. The angles are all so well proportioned and done that if you came in this door, it would look the same as if you came in that door, or that door here. That's amazing by itself. But he also decided to pick a moment in history to write it. It is a moment of time. And it is the moment after Jesus said, "One of you will betray me." It is that moment that he painted, like it was a picture, like a photograph of that moment. And each of them has the reaction of what they just heard. The ones at the ends, some of them are saying, "What did he just say?" You know, it's that kind of thing. Where the ones closest to him are in absolute shock. It is a masterpiece, without doubt. Other things about it are masterpieces. But restoring that is something extraordinary. It's not a do-it-yourself project. And, our purpose, humanity's purpose, has been so tarnished that it is not something that we can restore ourselves, okay? But through the gospel of Jesus Christ, the purpose can be restored forever, okay? I think that's what this lesson is about today. And so let's look at Acts chapter 3. And to look at the background, we're going to, as far as talking about the lesson, we start in verse 14, but the story of this particular incident would begin at verse 1, and it's where Peter and John were on their way to the temple to pray, and they were interrupted by a man who was a beggar. He was a beggar because he was lame. And he was at this part of the temple. It was at a gate there, one of the entrances to the temple, and the gate is called Beautiful, the Beautiful Gate. In contrast, what they saw, what was something that was not pretty. When we go to these great cities of the world, and we're there as tourists, perhaps, and we're amazed at the buildings or the parks or the other things that you go to see there, sometimes you're distracted because you're walking by some homeless person, a person that you can't help but see also. And so there is beauty, but there's also something that is not pretty, that we have to see. But, I think one of the contrasts that we see in the view of the world by the world and the view of the world by God is that the world wants us to see the beauty and the strength and the power that the world offers, and they want us to ignore or overlook weakness and infirmity and ugliness. They want us to ignore it. And we're not to ignore it. We're to try to do something about it, I think. And it says, now Peter and John were going up to the temple for the time of prayer at 3 p.m. A man who was lame from birth was being carried there. He was placed each day at the temple gate called Beautiful, so that he could beg from those entering the temple. When he saw Peter and John about to enter the temple, he asked for money. And Peter, along with John, and to me, this is one of the keys to the way we are to view the world, actually. Peter and John looked straight at him and said, "Look at us." So he turned to them, expecting to get something from them. But Peter said, "Of course, I don't have silver or gold, but what I do have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, get up and walk." Then taking him by the right hand, he raised him up, and at once his feet and ankles became strong. So he jumped up and started to walk, and he entered the temple with them, walking, leaping, and praising God. So, I think that from time to time in our lives, we've got our Who's Your One program here as an outreach, which I think is a wonderful thing. We need to have outreach as a church. If we don't, we won't grow, and we will not be doing our job as a church. One of the jobs we have is evangelism, of course, and discipling is one of our jobs. And so I think that even though Who's Your One says for us to pray for a particular person specifically is the plan of that program, we are to try to hear the conviction of God toward a person and write that person and begin to say prayers about somehow reaching out to that person. I do think we are to pray, Lord, put a person in front of me today, a person, any person, so that I can have the opportunity to share my faith or to minister to a person. And I think that if we pray that prayer, God will answer that prayer and will place a person in front of you. And if we're actually thinking about our prayer during the day, if there is that outreach consciousness, then we'll recognize it when God places that person in front of us. And I think you could even call it sometimes, the way God does it, is an interruption. It's an interruption. And sometimes we get frustrated with interruptions. But, interruptions may be God placing somebody in front of you, if you understand what I'm saying. This was an interruption that caused all of this in this chapter. An interruption. They were walking into this temple to pray, okay? They hadn't even got to the prayer yet, But I'm going to say that Peter and John had prayed before that morning, even before they got to the temple that afternoon at 3. And I bet one of their prayers was, Lord, help me share my faith with others today. And we see that the next part of this, in verse 11, it says that the title in my Bible says, Preaching in Solomon's Colonnade. So the healing of the lame beggar led to the opportunity for him to preach a sermon to a crowd of people who might not otherwise have even been there to listen to him. But the healing caused them to watch and to listen and to want to know more.